Hello everyone and welcome to the Belgian Football Podcast. My name's Scott Coyne and I'll be your host for this episode, and joining me to review the week in Belgian football is everybody's favourite Belgian, at least around these here BFP parts. It's our very own Mr. Joris Beck, who I believe this week, Joris is going hands-free this week. You've got a new toy, don't you, Joris?
Yeah, definitely. I do have a nice little microphone stand. Well, not so little actually, but yeah, that makes life a lot easier for me actually from this side of the world. But, yeah, and unfortunately I couldn't see any Genk game with it this weekend, of course. But yeah, we'll get to that. There were less games.
We will indeed. Joris is right. There was 2 less games this weekend on Matchday 5 because of a lot of European action. So Cercle against Ghent and Anderlecht Genk will both be rescheduled. So we'll circle back to them at the appropriate moment. But yeah, it's been another busy week across the Belgian football landscape, Joris, and it never stops here at the Belgian Football Podcast, because in the last few days I've been away visiting some relatives. And while I was away, I was contacted by Voices of the Vic podcast, which for those of you who don't know is a popular Watford fan podcast. And of course, they got in touch because they wanted the lowdown on their now new signing, Pierre Duomo, who regular listeners will know he's now left Belgium and gone to Watford on a long-term deal. So me being away for a few days, it never stops. Eat, sleep, drink Belgian football. Eat, sleep, drink Belgian football, even when you're away visiting family. But that's the way we like it here. So speaking of which, should we just dive off the cliff as everyone's waiting for that, and start the score roundup as we always do. So this weekend in the Pro League, Westerlo drew 1-1 with Leuven. Antwerp lost 1-0 to Mechelen. Dender lost 2-1 at home to Club Brugge. St Truden and Union Saint-Gilloise played out a 0-0 draw, which was every bit as dull as 0-0 draws tend to be. Standard managed to get 3 points at home against Beerschot. They won 1-0. And Charleroi also got 3 points in their home game against Kortrijk, winning 1-0 likewise. So let's start in Westerlo. Why not? Westerlo won, Leuven won, Joris. Few takeaways from this game, really. We know now that Iwu Platinx has fractured his fibula. Nasty injury, which will see him probably miss the majority of the season, if not all of it. That's a really bad one. And a game that Leuven probably could have won in injury time. What about that moment? Conan Hendry beats Sinon Bola, or at least his shot beats Sinon Bola, only to come off the post. They thought they'd managed to nick it. The good news for Leuven is they're still undefeated, which I suppose they'll take all day long. But yeah, it finishes one apiece and a share of the points.
Yep, and like I mentioned last week, they're not grabbing enough wins out of this, and this definitely could have been one, as you already mentioned with that last minute shot from Hendry. Actually, quite a lot around the game, mainly, I guess, from both sides. There was quite some outgoing transfer activity. From Westerlo's side, Madsen has left. A big loss for them. We'll have to see how they cope with that over the course of the rest of the season. Westerlo did not play badly. Mebude getting a goal. They still seem to be scoring goals, which is a very important factor. Will they be able to shut enough teams out? That's the bigger question for the remainder of the season. Assuming that the goals are not going to come all the time, keep coming. Maybe they do, of course, but it's likely that at some point there will be a slight goal drought, like every team has once in a while in a season. Will they be able to cope with that? And also the first consecutive Westerlo Leuven fixture that they didn't win as well. So specifically this one, the home fixture. That for Westerlo, quite a few question marks and probably their main important player leaving the club in Madsen. And at Leuven's side, of course, there's even more transfer activity with Xing Tian, who seems to be going to Venezia. I'm not sure if it's already confirmed by now. Of course, unfortunately, indeed, that's not a transfer news, but you touched on it already. Platinx being out with that fibula fracture. Yeah, in the news that broke only after the game and only now in the week past, in the few weekdays we had since that game. with Torstein Ston going to Hertha Berlin. Quite an important player for them as well, even though it seems like it didn't completely click with Oscar Garcia, maybe, but nonetheless, a goal contributor at least for them going. So that was more around the game, but on the game itself, well, I guess a draw more or less a good, decent result. Leuven had quite a few chances, but it was a bit funny to see a little bit that all of Mazis, Martens, and Verstraeten, of course, all had tried from distance already in the first half. And then in the end, it's Balikwisha who was the lucky one, getting a shot from distance in with a bit of luck, because it was a deflected one, of course. Okay, all in all, a draw. If you're a betting man, like I said, I guess Leuven games are good games to bet on a draw. And Westerlo, they only got 1 point now out of the last 2 games. Is it really a downfall yet? Like people have already predicted from them, well, of course they will go slide down a little in the classifications, coming from top spot, but it's a bit early to tell. It's not that they have been playing so poorly. Just how will they cope with that loss of Madsen, and will they still get some incoming in as well for a replacement for him, for example?
Of course, the Belgian window's got sort of another week yet. A lot of the other windows will be slamming shut at the end of this week. So depending on when you listen to this episode, they may already have closed. Belgium's got another few days, of madness after that. So we will see what happens. Somebody who did have a very good game in this game this weekend, Lucas Stassen, he had another strong game. And the thing about Westerlo is, although they didn't win, I think, we've talked about this as well already this season, probably more than once, their output again is kind of quite good. There's a lot of players, a good number of players on that side are still performing to a pretty good level at the moment. So I don't think they'll be too disappointed with that. Speaking of disappointment, there was a fair bit of disappointment at the Bossel, of course, this weekend. Antwerp losing at home to Mechelen, who got their first win of the season, which was really important for them for kind of lots of reasons, because they've had a pretty poor start. Antwerp's home form, I think, in some ways being a bit disappointing, and perhaps a slight concern, because they did have their fair share of chances, certainly to get something out of the game, if not to win it themselves. Mechelen braving a lot of really early pressure and only really starting to come into the game later on before braving more pressure kind of towards the game, towards the end. So in some ways it was kind of a slightly odd game. Controversial goal, of course. Joris de Rock had a lot to say about that afterwards, didn't he? And of course the refereeing department confirming afterwards that they felt in retrospect that the goal should not have stood, to make Joris de Rock feel even better about his post-match kind of comments. Ortwin de Wolf having a good game. Don't know whether that was anything to do with the black eye that he'd sustained in training a couple of days before. Maybe a lucky sign for this game, who knows. Other things of note, maybe Benito Raman obviously coming into Mechelen a day or so before, getting his first 15 minutes. Big ask of him this season, really, Joris, isn't it? Because we know he's going to be the one who's, the burden of scoring a good number of goals is going to fall on him. Ondrejka, again, I thought, having a good game. But yeah, I mean, Mechelen come away from this with a win, and that's all Besnik Hazy will care about, really, at the end of the day, because they really needed it, didn't they?
They really needed it, and well, based on the first half, you can't really say they stole it either. Antwerp had 0 shots on target, and so Antwerp was not playing at their best at that half, even though they still had a few chances outside of, regardless of not having a shot on target. But Mechelen actually played really well. I found on the counter attack, they arguably could or should have scored a few more as well. It's a bit of the situation they're in, I guess, that it's a bit ironic. That's a goal that actually should have been disallowed, that gets them over the line. But for Antwerp, I would say like their defense is not on point so far, it seems. Yeah, and like I mentioned, 0 shots on target in the first half. Then it becomes very difficult to win games, of course. De Roek also had that issue a little bit with Westerlo. Well, more than a little bit, actually, at Westerlo at times as well. So it's a bit in his game plan. They will need to score more goals. And they have scored 6 in one game, but outside of that one game, they've only scored 4, I believe, among the main of the game. So just 1 per game, which is not enough. In this case, they didn't even manage to score 1. Their second half was better though. That they did create a bit more, and Ortin de Wolf had to save Mechelen indeed a few times. And a bit weird to say because it looked like they actually were having a good start, Antwerp, but now 3 losses in 5, 2 home losses in 3 home games as well. In stats, at least, they did actually miss their start, despite them actually playing most of the time, or at times at least, not really bad or anything. But they're not getting enough outputs out of it. On Mechelen again, then same result as last season actually at the Bosel, just a duplicate victory. And like I mentioned, we generally played quite well, just not efficient, especially in the first half. Second half was more in the half for Antwerp. It was a bit of a two-faced a game with 2 faces, 2 halves. But and then getting their first win over the line, definitely a relief for many amongst the Mechelen fans and Scott for sure. For a few unfortunate mentions, of course, as well. Both Van Heusden and Van Kleemput getting injured. Van Heusden already before the game was confirmed, and Van Kleemput, really really early on in the game. I think after 15 minutes, he had to go off for Bas van den Einde. Well, that's also a typical story. Then, of course, and a better story, I guess, that he then puts gets them over the line with his first ever senior goal as well. Van Kleemput, sad story again. And for both Van Kleemput and Van Heusden, a little bit of gambles, I guess, from the Mechelen sportive direction. And so far it didn't last long. Hopefully the injuries will not be too long, and they will be able to perform a bit in this season still. Unfortunately, Benny's not here because there's always so many chances to bring up that bet that he made about Van Kleemput being injured in this transfer window still. Unfortunately, he would have won that bet if anyone would have taken him up on that, but I don't think anyone did.
He would indeed, and I know he was very confident in thinking that was the way it was kind of going to go. It looks like Big Zeno Van Heusden is probably out until after the upcoming international break, so he'll be missing for a few weeks anyway, which is obviously kind of bad news for Mechelen. Hopefully he can kind of get fit and he can get a good run in the side, because he is a player we know who can have an impact when he stays fit. They also need to be very careful. I remember recently when he joined the club, Besnik did say that it was important that they managed his game time sensitively, and that he wanted to be guided by the medical staff as well. So they've already been quite careful with him. So we wish him well and look forward to hopefully seeing him back after the upcoming international break. Vincent Janssen had some interesting comments after this game. He was talking about how frustrating it was for Antwerp really to lose this, and had been kind of wanting to highlight that actually they've been playing, as we were saying last week, generally quite positive football, pretty decent stuff, just not being able to quite get the results. And of course, they were playing against a goalkeeper this weekend who, up until very recently, was part of the Antwerp camp, somebody they know very well in Ortin de Wolf, who had a pretty good game going back to his recent home club. So, that adding to the frustration, I think, of some of the Antwerp players and probably the Antwerp fans as well. I suppose there's a few little issues that will be, as you were saying, be mildly concerning to them now. They're not playing badly, but they're not managing to kind of, be efficient enough and take the chances that they are creating at the moment. And that's something that will need to be addressed so that they don't go on a run of form that could cause them a little bit of a problem if they don't address that soon. Be interesting to see if there's any more tweaks in terms of incomings and outgoings there over the next few days as well. We know they're not going to be big spenders anymore because the model's changed, rightly so, of course, but you would imagine that maybe one interesting face could really, lift that squad after a disappointing kind of couple of weeks. Moving on to another game, a game that had some more goals, certainly, than the first two games did this weekend. Dender losing at home to Club Brugge 2-1. Interesting game, this, on a few levels. Club started pretty brightly, got a lot of the heavy lifting done early, obviously, going into a 2-goal lead within the first sort of first quarter of the game. But the second half was very different. It kind of could have gone either way, really, and Club kind of sort of fell out of the game a little bit. Not necessarily hanging on, but, Dender came into it, and in a way, it's a bit of a narrow win for the away side, you might say.
I also have to quickly correct myself. Still, in the previous game, it's even only 2 games that goals Antwerp have scored in the rest of the games, so that's a bit worrying. Their defense is holding up quite well, though. They also only conceded 4. That's all right, but yeah. Anyway, okay, moving on to the game where you wanted to talk about already. The good summary, I guess. But what it looked like, Club Brugge had everything under control after 15 minutes, but then it slowly faded and their levels dropped. And well, by the time Dender scored, it actually was not a surprise anymore. You felt the goal coming right before halftime. Notoriously a bad moment, although I still feel like it's probably the best moment because there's 15 minutes to change something in that. But okay, that's another topic. It was the first time Dender didn't score the first goal in the game. One, if there were goals in the game, of course, they also drew a 0-0 in the beginning already. But yeah, with Verrips dreadfully misjudging the high ball and Nilsson scoring his first field goal as well. Also arguably easier than a penalty that he scored last week as well. But he's off the mark there as well. So that will be good for his confidence. Followed by a really quick first goal for Zolis in the league. It was a really nice finish, and the whole attack was actually quite nicely played out. A few weird things, or at least one weird thing. Pupe still getting a yellow card after his so-called fall, I guess. It was a big one, but it was a big tackle, but he still got the ball. It was just a fair challenge. I'm happy at least he didn't get the red cards that he initially got by the VAR, but I'm surprised he still got anything out of it, and that it even was a foul, to be honest. Or ultimately maybe a foul, but then no card would have been, that would have been justified. Now he still has to carry that one card. The assist king of the Pro League so far still as well. Central defender at Dender. Who would have thought that? even if it's only after 5 games already, of course, but still. Then on Club Brugge, like I mentioned, looked really easy win. But way too lax after that 0-2, and ultimately getting away with it a bit, with Ordóñez saving the day for them with a last-ditch tackle for Dender equalizer in the dying seconds as well, and something outside of the game which is worth highlighting as well for Club Brugge, the unfortunate news of their former manager Christophe Daum, who deceased on that one. I believe that news broke on Matchday actually as well on the Sunday morning. He was only there for a year, but it was at the beginning of the Manhart Verhagen era, and bringing them a bit back. And I think he got second, which was probably the highest position they've gotten in at that time. So really brought them a bit back to the levels they want. Notoriously with the Arsenal score as well, though that's maybe less nice. But he brought some structure and it professionalized. Played his role in professionalizing the club already a bit as well. So sad to hear from him going. His passing, of course. Now I've probably got more out of that as well, since I live in Germany, obviously. So I've got some more news stories about that. He unfortunately fell to the cancer disease. In the end, lost the fight at the age of 70. But sad to see him go. Good for Club Brugge that they won this one, but still a bit worrying signs that they, still seem to have the same issues as the past 2 seasons, I even think I could say. But they got away with this time.
Yeah, I was just going to say, a sense that they very much, they did enough to get it over the line, kind of just, but perhaps not with the sort of performance that would make you feel that the pressure that's been surrounding Nicky Ian over the last couple of weeks probably hasn't lifted that much. You feel that they would need to go on a little run of decent results with improved performances probably for that to disappear. So the question marks around their level at the moment perhaps are kind of still there, and that's one of the things I took away from this game. Speaking of levels, an altogether different level, go from a game that had some goals to a game that finished goalless. The Daewoo Wasabi Stein, St Truden 0, Union Saint-Gilloise 0. And I think, an odd game, not a great game, but St Truden will be delighted in one respect, and that is they've got a clean sheet, considering they conceded 14 in their first 4. So that's a big positive. Del Pupo, of course, red card on his debut, a memorable debut for the wrong reasons, not something you want. But offensively, again, St Truden just desperately poor, really, not really creating enough at all. As we've been highlighting really since the start of the season. Also a second player, 2 players this weekend, obviously sustaining fractures. Enoch Techlab as well has fractured his leg as well. Never something you want to see, so he's going to be missing for quite some time as well. And there are some mounting injuries for Union now, so that's a bit of a background concern for them at a time when there's a bit of scrutiny around them at the moment, isn't there, Joris? Because obviously they've not started in a way that they would want, but it's a difficult one because judging by certainly the previous 2 seasons, they've been flying, of course. So to start, and their start hasn't been bad. I think that's something I would stress. But, they're being judged compared to their start over the last couple of years, which isn't what they would want. So that period of adjustment that we spoke about last week is very much in full flow. Pocagnoli had some interesting comments this week as well. He said, in the current context, we have to rely a lot on our character and mentality to get us through at the moment. And I thought that was slightly odd because this isn't a side really that struggled in terms of their character or mentality at all. I know players have left and some new ones have come in, but I thought to choose to highlight that specifically, I felt was a little bit odd. They've lost some big players, obviously, even just in recent days. They've lost Amura, Puertas now gone as well. So big offensive players who were big links for them, right across that side. But ultimately, nobody's going to be happy with that result, are they?
No, definitely. But, I think I get where Pocagnoli gets his comments from because very uncharacteristically, outside of the loss of the players and some players missing through injuries, unlike last 2 seasons, are among the worst teams in duels won and headers won in the whole league, which is something, that's the worrying side thing next to the... at least this was a statistic from before this game, but I don't think it will have changed that much anyway. It's not. They didn't play well enough to really justify that changing much. This game had, if you look at it in hindsight, a 0-0 written all over it. Of course, 0 shots on target from Sint-Truiden, 2 shots on target only from Union as well, though, which is another worrying thing for them, of course. Although there are mitigating factors definitely on that front. But that was one thing. Union also not giving away much in general. They had that bad game against Westerlo where they conceded 4. There they gave away a lot, but outside of that one, it seems to be an outlier. And in Europe, they unfortunately also gave away a few goals, but that's yet another outlier, I hope, literally for them. But they rotated a lot also up front, and another sign of the times at the current times. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but a sign at least that their squad is indeed being stretched a little bit thin, with Guillaume Francois starting the game, that he's now 34. Last year he only started 1 game and he had a total of 65 minutes, I believe, all across the whole season. I think he's already past that now. So there's definitely something still needed and lacking at Union. I'm sure they are aware of that, and there's some time to get it going. And in the league, okay, their start has not been the best, but they're still in a peloton. It's not that they're really behind anything. It's more the level of play and then the standard of that we're used to them. We're not seeing in most of the games so far, or just at sparks. And there's always doubts, of course, with can they sustain it with the new manager and with a lot of players going, with now Puertas indeed going to, well, Brighton has moved apparently that we were alluding to Saudi Arabia. I think we should notify Ben about that. that he knows that he also moved countries, and he should ask for a raise probably as well. But still a little bit sad, I guess, to see. But okay, who are we to judge on that? Sint-Truiden, on the other hand, well, they might be probably the slightly happier side coming out of this game. Of course, they desperately do need a win at some point. Now they even didn't give away that many shots on target, so that's definitely encouraging. Although it's not that they didn't try to give away a few goals, especially in the second half. There were a few bad passes or bad defending, playing out of the back that have gone wrong. The situations that could have cost them, but luckily for them, that did not happen. Which probably with against a different Union side like we used to, actually would have would pay dividends if they would have done that. And of course, also only scored 5 goals in these 5 games. That's, of course, not enough, like we touched on other sides as well. Del Pupo, that's interesting debut, 5 minutes. And I mean, I think the challenge was more clumsy than anything else, but still like a very clear red card nonetheless. So that's unfortunate for him, definitely. And definitely interesting games coming up for Sint-Truiden in the upcoming weeks as well, with a fixture against Beerschot. Among the ones, I think that's one is straight after the international break, which comes already after the next game day, sooner than you think. I think they will be highlighting that one.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I think to look out for. With both of these clubs at the moment, there are certainly no signs yet that St Truiden's defensive issues are any nearer being addressed. Really, like you say, there were quite a few instances in this game where you thought, okay, nothing's shifting in a meaningful way yet in the right direction. And with Union as well, there's just, I think, Sebastian Pocagnoli, as I was saying, he's talking about adjustments, an adjustment period and rotation, and he was honest about that he was going to rotate to give players a chance and to get to know them better. Is there a sense on your part, Joris, that he's any closer to maybe knowing any more about this squad now and maybe who he thinks his best 11 is? Because I think, when we think about how consistent they've been over the last 3 years, say, a lot of that's been built on avoiding injuries to key players. They've been very lucky in that sense, but also been pretty consistent with their general team selection as well. There's not been too much change. So the sort of rotation that's going on just now is quite a different thing. It's not always a bad thing, as you were saying. I mean, that's very important. I think a lot of people assume rotation is can be inherently a negative thing, and it isn't always, depending on how you use it, but this is something we haven't really seen from them at all. And I just wonder if you get any thoughts on whether that's playing into a little bit of the inconsistency with the levels as well, because it's come along at the same time that big players have left, and it's just, there's a lot of things going on in the mix there. I suppose that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, there definitely are, partially in their control, partially, less. Definitely injuries, you can't do anything about. Transfers can always be tricky as well. So, or actually also only partially under control. There's still some rumors as well for some more outgoings, but also some incoming rumors as well. So, definitely there will be some movement either way. They actually are used to that at the beginning of the season, I guess, though. Like, at least on the first game days, there has been like a squad overhaul over the course of past years. But, of course, that's really only for the first 1 or 2 games. Maybe even after that, most of these new players stayed, or they got a little chance and they moved a bit backwards in a squad selection list. But yeah, I mean, it can play a role. Of course, it's very tricky to make judgments on that at the moment, because like especially with European qualifiers, one, it happens at other clubs as well, and two, yeah, I mean, it is actually the right time to rotate that much as well. When we can only see later on in the season and judge if that's paid off or not. Of course, at some point they will have to move towards a more strict starting 11 or like a base or a core of 15 players or so that are the most featuring ones. But I do think it can play a role. So I think they will be quite happy with whatever they're getting right now. A draw at Sint-Truiden is probably not what I would be happy about when you single it out. But if you look at the overall picture, I think they're not too unhappy yet. And they'll see if maybe that they won't be anyway either, if they indeed get a more stabilized squad selection and squad in general, and things are clear.
Yeah, I think Pocagnoli's actually handling everything that's going on there at the moment, and there's a lot on his plate, as we know, quite well. I think he's been very honest, and he's been quite rigorous, I feel, as well. The honesty is one thing, but he's given players a chance, and he's actually doing, I think, what he needs to do is T1 to genuinely get a sense of what he's got there. So he's not hiding behind some of the issues that are going on, and I kind of admire that. I think that's a positive sign. Where that leads, we'll find out. But I think how he's handling it is positively. That's for sure. Even though there is some increasing scrutiny on them. Speaking of scrutiny, there's certainly been plenty of scrutiny on Beerschot on our part in recent weeks. We've been highlighting some pretty worrying early issues, which they're not unaware of course. They went to Sklesen this weekend, losing 1-0 to Ivan Leko's Standard. Dirk Kuyt not happy at all with referees. He had some quite strong words about how he felt they were shortchanged this weekend. Again, a game with few chances, Standard winning it from the spot, which makes it a little bit easier for them. There was a fascinating stat I came across when I was looking at some of my numbers this week, Joris. In the last 75 seasons across the Pro League, so the last 75 years, no club has scored fewer goals in the first 5 match days than Standard. Now that's... I was slightly staggered by that stat. I mean, it's a slightly wild and odd one, but at the same time, in Matchday 5 context, that's quite wild. When you consider that during that period, obviously, Standard have won titles as well. So, even in years where they've started slowly, they've, and not scoring, they've gone on to do well. But yeah, there's obviously something about the first 5 weeks of any season, even good seasons for them, which they've not had for a long time now. Slow starters in many respects, you might say. Beerschot now, one point out of the 15. We know this, but, a grim start, and their output, as we've been highlighting again, just not good. I mean, looking at some of those numbers, I wanted a closer look at this week, and they're averaging so far less than 3 shots a game. And just to put this in context, when the first 5 match days, Westerlo, who are performing quite well in terms of their output, are averaging sort of 8 to 9 shots a game on target. So they're quite a bit. It's not the greatest metric in the world to judge sides by, but it's an interesting little one just in terms of, you can't get anything out of a game unless you're getting a decent number of shots on target, because that means, your offensive metrics are poor. And they have brought in a new defender. There's another striker coming in. They've been quite busy. They've been talking to Anderlecht quite a lot and Jesper Fredberg over the last few days, obviously. Some players from Anderlecht look like they're coming in, players that we know as well, quite well known, that many people have probably forgotten about. So they're working kind of hard to turn that corner that they're desperately hard to get the better of. I
also had that stat of the 75 years, so thank you for taking that one away from me. But, all good, of course. But that's now... I had noted with that, of course, getting the most out of their goals, of course, as well. So getting 8 points out of these 5 games, with scoring only twice. Arguably, that could have been only once. I don't completely disagree with Guts on the referee not being completely, at least not on their side. He doesn't need to be, of course, but the referee, some dodgy referee decisions potentially at least. April again another clean sheet as well, but also actually not giving a secure impression unless he got very lucky at least one occasion, and I think actually a few occasions a bit unorthodox at times. And yeah, at the one occasion I'm mainly referring to like playing out of the back going wrong completely, and like ball bounced from him to a Beerschot player and then luckily back to him or something like that. I don't recall the phrase completely anymore, but yeah, Standard getting results and getting a lot of points for the output they are getting, and getting a little lucky at times still as well now. Beerschot, actually I have to say they played quite all right until they got that red card, which is one of the talking points. Yeah. I personally don't think it necessarily should be a red, and it's a frustrating one a bit as well because the referee actually had judged it like a yellow one, which, that you could give, I think, but then the VAR intervened, and after that intervention it turned into a red. It's always weird when the referee actually takes the right, what most people feel like the right decision, and then the VAR still intervenes and makes it a wrong decision after that. But okay, and after that, the Beerschot disappeared out of the game a little bit, not surprisingly either. Got furious at the ref in his post-match interview as well. And at least on the red card, I agree. Penalty, it's a light one, I guess. Here it would be also a case like if that the VAR would not have intervened this time, if it would not have been whistled by the referee, I guess. So yeah, it's like a 50-50 one. I guess that could have gone either way, and Standard got the lucky side of the coin this time. Benjdida scoring his first goal that way for Standard, for the senior squad. That is a mention, worth a mention. And like I mentioned for Sint-Truiden, for Beerschot, the upcoming weeks are definitely really interesting ones with fixtures against Dender and Sint-Truiden as their next two ones. And a third one against Charleroi, although we'll get to Charleroi later, but that might not be the easiest fixtures of them. But before that, they at least have two games with a lot of pressure on it, and on Dirk Kuyt himself as well, I guess, and definitely on the whole squad. If they want to get out of this already precarious situation, they probably would need 2 wins out of those games, or at least 4 points, I guess, to at least give themselves a little bit of a breathing space, even though they would still be quite down in the table, but they would drag some other teams with them.
Yeah, and they'll definitely be looking to do that. I mean, I think you're right. The red card did absolutely change this game, as it does most games. And Thibaut Verlinden actually was quite strong post-match as well, saying that, up until that point, he felt they were very much in the game and actually the better of the two sides. So I think he felt, or he wanted to highlight that he felt if anyone was going to win it, it might have been them, but for the red card in the end. They just kind of need to keep working hard and hope things turn. And obviously those new players coming in that we alluded to, Dirk Kuyt will be hoping will very much be part of that. And it's important that they come in before these upcoming games, obviously as well, because they have the chance to impact on those. You mentioned Charleroi. Let's go to them now. They also won 1-0 this weekend against Frere Alexanderson's Kortrijk side, a game that can probably be described as a routine, easy home win. The winner coming from Charleroi man of the moment, who's actually had a very good start to the season, Dan Heymans, of course, joint top scorer just now with a certain Tolo Rokadari.
We do remember, of course, also that he had a similar or an even better start of the season at Waasland Beveren, and I believe that unfortunately was in the season that they went down ultimately, and his goal production also stopped. So let's hope for him. Let's hope for him and them that is not going to repeat itself. That's 4 goals in 5 games for him. I immediately had to make that connection because in recent seasons, unfortunately, did not really have that many goals, or at least not at the start of the season. But now 4 goals. That's good, and we've always asked who is going to score the goals for Charleroi, despite them having a lot of options up front. Luckily for them, Heymans is filling that in for them at the moment. They really played very well, especially in the first half. Similar to Mechelen in Antwerp, I guess, a little bit. They should have scored more goals. They should have killed this game. So that's the only thing they can be a little bit annoyed about, I guess, is that that they didn't do that, and that the game was exciting that way until the final whistle, because there was no bigger gap in the scoreline. They also got a bit unlucky, I guess, as well. I think there were one or two shots on the woodwork in the game that does not help either, and that is good win for them. Really, I think they're now top third in the league as well. Okay, the league is now a little bit skewed because of this 2 games not taking place, and it's difficult to see where everyone would be after the results of the other games will come in. We will know in a month or so. But still a good start for them. Good points haul, playing quite well, at least at spells of the games. I think the main point is still to keep that the whole game, because the second half was a bit less well of them, or at least Kortrijk became a bit more dangerous, which is a natural flow of a game as well, of course. Nothing unusual, but it could have still gone differently. Although Kortrijk haven't won in Charleroi in 6 years' time, specifically 6 years' time. It was also on the 25th of August, 2018, that they had won the last game, and that was the same date as the fixture this year. But if you only get one shot on target, it's difficult to win a game, of course, as well. Kortrijk, it's still a bit topsy-turvy, I guess, this season so far, which is arguably better than last season nonetheless. But it still could go wrong for them if they keep playing games like these. But we've also already seen them perform better. So, as long as they do that, they probably will be fine. Just they have to be a bit more consistent in their performances.
Yeah, and I'm just remembering what Frere Alexanderson said last week about it's really important that the majority of players reach a basic level in order to kind of try and get some consistency going. And even if you can't get consistency going, you still need a basic level. Otherwise, you'll be in the trouble that we saw they were in for, the majority of last season. We should have a little chat about Europe, because in the last few days there's been some really good results for Belgian sides in these European playoffs. One of the 3 sides seems to have done the job already. They didn't want to play a second leg. They wanted to get it finished early. That's Cercle Bruges, of course, who had a thumping result in Poland, playing Wisła Krakow, coming away with a 6-1 win, a really strong performance and some really good quality goals on the evening. And you would imagine, barring a disaster, which I don't think anyone's expecting, that's group stage football in the Conference League guaranteed for Cercle, I would think, which is great news. The other sides, Ghent, the Buffaloes went to Belgrade and came away with a 1-0 win, so they still have a little bit to do to get it over the line, but they're halfway there. Likewise, Anderlecht went to not Belarus, but on this occasion, as we know, they went to Hungary to play Dynamo Minsk, and like Ghent, came away with a 1-0 win, so they still have a little bit to do to seal the deal, but generally a really good night for Belgian sides, and hopefully Ghent and Anderlecht can finish the job this week. Joris, are you nervous at all for them?
In results, it was a good week, but 2 of the 3, Cercle should be fine. The other 2 narrow wins, in Ghent's case, a good case, I guess, but a little bit. So I think they have most control of the game, but in the end, Partizan had a few chances, so that Ghent is probably the most tricky one. And that being said, Anderlecht got away with one that they should never be the case against Dynamo Minsk. With all due respect, Kozmans being the man of the match again at home, they should be able to, even if it's the same result, of course, as Ghent. Their opponent is at least on paper a lot worse than Ghent's one. So I'm quietly confident, but I'm not counting my blessings or our blessings just yet with these 2 narrow results. Anderlecht should be fine, I guess. And it's always we are very reluctant to say anything about Ghent, especially in Europe. I believe, and I think I'll continue that. But you would think they would be able to keep them in Europe as well this time. But we will have to wait and see.
Yeah, it's never over till it's over at this level, is it? Unless you win 6-1. That's the lesson to take from those round of fixtures. We must touch on another fairly big bit of news this week as well. The Little Prince, as many know him, the Belgian FA's technical director, Francky Vercauteren, is now almost certain that his contract's not going to be renewed. Joris, we know that now. It was due to expire in December. It's not going to be renewed. And I thought this was interesting for a number of reasons. One, because obviously he's a hugely respected figure in the game in Belgium, and rightly so, is eminently qualified for this job. And there's just a little bit of intrigue around this, because we know that there is a bit of disquiet inside the Belgian FA at the moment. The post-Euros tournament assessment, hasn't entirely satisfied some individuals inside the FA. Some people are not happy with the content of that, and there are individuals on the sporting committee, and for those of you who don't know, that's made up at the moment of Anderlecht's Wouter van den Hout, Antwerp's Sven Jacks, and Pierre Locht at Standard. They're the kind of advisory committee to some of the senior figures at the Belgian FA, and I think, reading between the lines, it's quite obvious that Frankie, the Little Prince, doesn't have some friends on that committee, because there's been a bit of scrutiny there, and it seems very odd, because this news came out at the same time that we discovered that Vincent Manner, of course, who's not long left Club Brugge, was in some discussions about possibly replacing Frankie, which is really odd, because in my view he's completely unqualified to do that job. Really, it's a very complex role, and although he did quite a good job at Club Brugge, it's not the same sort of job at all by any means. So putting this out there from my perspective, I think there are some people inside the Belgian FA who have a little bit more influence, arguably, than they should, and I just worry a little bit now that they don't replace the Little Prince with somebody necessarily not only with the background and qualities that he has, but that they go down some route in... We know there are budgetary issues there, and that's the public reason that they're letting Frankie go. I suspect that's not the real reason. Is he being made a fall guy, perhaps, in some respects for the Euros? And is there a danger that he's not replaced adequately? That's one of the things that worries me, Joris. What's your take on all of this news? Because it's not been discussed too much this week, but I kind of feel that it should be.
Yeah, there's just a lot of turmoil there. Of course, CEO Van den Driessen probably will resign, or will be forced to resign in the upcoming days as well. Manhart actually might still show up as his replacement. Actually, that would not be a complete surprise. There's so much turmoil. Also, the youth. Also at the sportive levels, I believe all the youth trainers outside of the under 23s have been changed now as well. Like a lot of the structure that was there, and was not. Well, I've always been quite a defender of Martinez until the end. Well, ultimately it was time to move on, but like in his function as technical director, everything he built up there, which everyone unanimously seemed like to be at least still very content with. That's satisfied with as well. Like it seems to be falling apart really quickly now, which is a bit worrying. Also, I'm actually super frustrated that Tedesco actually is staying in as well. I guess that might have to do with some financial issues, but I fear. Well, okay, I hope I'm completely wrong with this, but I fear that with the damage that has been done at the Euros, and that he won't be able to turn it around either himself. That in the confidence and the belief, and that financially actually could harm the whole FA a bit more, even if they would keep him on longer. If you look at the indirect income and so on as well. Also, do we believe, not only the indirect income, I guess also the main income is usually the results, and especially at tournaments. Of course, one failed tournament on its own does not necessarily need to be the reason, although it is the main reason, and it's more the way it happened. And the way things have unfolded as well. There is the situation with Courtois, of course, as well. We also said again last week that he went. Of course, Courtois is to blame at that one occasion as well, but more and more you can see that there are really two sides, and I think this is also a little bit Courtois pressuring the FA to discontinue with Tedesco, which they will, it seems like, not respond to. Okay, a matter of principle and anything. I have my own thoughts on that, but okay, I can get a reasoning why he wouldn't. But yeah, there's so many things going on and so much unclarity. It's all has this air, this typical Belgian air, I guess you could say, of amateurism at the highest levels. I guess it's not very typical Belgian. I know it happens in other countries as well, but nonetheless, it's a bit worrying, like how everything is going on, like all the communication in and outside is news, and like from the FA and from at every level, there seems to be something rotten in the state of the Belgian Football Association.
Yeah, there are definitely some concerning signs there of things that could get out of control, and not in a good way. I think if they don't make some smart choices next, in the coming months, I think, you're talking about Tedesco there. I think everybody knew really that Domenico was going to be staying on. Difficult situation. Extending his contract before the tournament was always a problematic decision in itself. We know that Francky Vercauteren and Tedesco actually had a reasonably good relationship. Tedesco did say, in fact, publicly the other day that his preference was for Francky Vercauteren to stay on. He's now exposed, arguably even more now, somebody he obviously had a positive working relationship with and enjoyed. He's now lost that confidant and that support. He's now going to be worried about who's coming in next and how that might impact him, which is totally understandable. So yeah, kind of more questions than answers, that's for sure. And it's important that we kind of highlighted that this week, I think, because people need to talk about this a little bit more. I think it's a bigger story than perhaps it's perceived to be this week. Before we touch on this weekend in the Challenger Pro League, Joris, let's circle back to a listener's question that we actually received last week, and we did say we would answer it this week. So we're going to do that because we're men of our word here. And it's a question from Football in Finland, otherwise known as at Finland Footy on X. They were asking us, how do we think, and there's a few players they want our opinion on, so we'll do it quite quickly because we could probably talk about this all night, but they want to know how Casper Terho at Union's going to do, Robbie Uhr at Anderlecht, Adiri Mobude at Westerlo, David Bates at Standard, and Ewan Henderson at Beerschot's going to do. So give us your lowdown, Joris.
I'll probably go for a bulk answer. Decent, but not outstanding for, I think, actually all of those players. In the case of Uhr, that probably means the futures mainly at Anderlecht, so in the Challenger Pro League, but he's done pretty well there last season. Enough so that even despite the big injury he got, they still re-signed him and on a longer deal now as well. Medbude just scored this weekend. He's featuring a bit more. It was not his first goal of the season either. He looks really exciting. So maybe out of the whole list, I think that might be the most exciting one specifically for this season. Henderson, well, I know that's someone you have a closer eye on and like are a bit of a fan of. He got his first goal as well, of course. Main thing is, can he prove it at this level? He seemed to be okay at Challenger Pro League level. Can he do it at a level higher, the step up as well? Bates, well, myself not the biggest fan, but so far he's performing well within that standard defense, which is looking surprisingly solid. I would still mention that surprisingly part as well, but so far. And who else was there? I'm missing one. Terho, I guess.
Yeah, Terho Union. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess as a Finnish name or name seems to indicate that that's probably the one he's most interested in, he or she, and that definitely. Yeah, we've seen glimpses of him. Maybe not enough on a consistent basis or on a season-long basis. So yeah, also interesting to watch if he can. I think he had quite a few really surprising performances in the playoffs, not last season, but the season before, coming out of nowhere, more or less. I think he already featured a little bit in Europe as well, and a few games before where we had good performances last season. It was a bit on and off, I guess. And so, now hopefully for him, it's time to be a bit more consistent in his performances and then show a bit more glimpses and flashes like he has shown in the past, on a bit more consistent basis. But so far, difficult to judge which way it will go for him, actually, both this season and at Union in general, I guess.
Yeah, he's been second fiddle to a number of players, really, which is why he's not been able to get kind of regular game time. I do wonder whether, the kind of mounting injuries, whether he might get more of an opportunity now. It'll obviously depend on what the prognosis is with some of those injuries. Funnily enough, Castro Montes, who is one of the players who has been keeping him out the side, has picked up a knock. So a choice for Pocagnoli to make as to whether Casper Terho might get a couple of games now. We'll see what happens there. I don't need to say anything positive about Ewan Henderson. I think I've mentioned him, on a few occasions. Big fan, genuine technical ability. I think he can make a real contribution to helping Beerschot, and he seems to be. He started the last couple of games now, so hopefully, as he gets an improved run, he will get better and better. We will see what happens there. Before we go, we should touch on this weekend in the Challenger Pro League, Joris. Eupen drawing 2-2 with Beveren this weekend. Lokeren losing again against Frank Moran 1-0. Patro Eisden defeating Anderlecht Futures 3-1. Liers winning again, winning home this time, winning 3-2 against Serang. Ral drawing 1-1 with Club Next. Lommel losing again. That's two losses to open the season for them. Losing at home to Molenbeek 2-0. Denza in a 2-2 draw with Zulte Waregem. Reasonably entertaining game, that one. And Young Genk winning 4-1 at home against RFC Liège. Not too much really to highlight in terms of the bigger picture at the moment because it's incredibly early days, but Liège, strong start, joint top with Young Genk, of course. And at the other end, Lokeren and Lommel both having bad starts. Lommel's bad start, perhaps a slight surprise because we know they've spent money. Quite a lot's expected of them. Lokeren, as we mentioned last week, having a really bad opening weekend. And this weekend, although they conceded a lot less, their output again was really poor. And I think they're kind of struggling at the moment to adjust to this level, as we were saying last week. And there's definitely still work to do there.
It looks like it. They're also the only side that hasn't scored yet in the whole league, which says a lot or doesn't say anything, I guess. But definitely something to watch. Few things on to highlight from. I watched the Young Genk game because at least I want to get some portion of Genk in my weekend. And if I couldn't get it with the senior squads, I went for them. Most of the game, at least, I watched. First half, they went behind and deservedly so, but also there was a really, really big save from Penders, who, on his own initiative, wanted to play for Young Genk this week, again because of the lack of game of the senior squad, and had a really good save, a few really good saves even, but one in particular, and ultimately they deservedly won with a 4-1. They put 4 behind the Edge defense and goalkeeper, and the second half was really good, really encouraging to see. And top of the league even, so that's a real surprise. Of course, they will not be able to sustain that. But no, it's already 6 points. They I've always mentioned. Their objective will be to just stay in the league. That's already 6 points they get. For example, on the likes of Loke at the moment and other sides. Lierse going out strong. That's also not necessarily expected, I guess. Especially last week. I guess this week, this victory on Serre, you could more or less expect, but. But against Zultuarium away, that definitely is a strong start for them. And let's see if they can continue on that path.
Absolutely, and that's it. That's the week in Belgian football from us. If you enjoy what we're doing here at the Belgian Football Podcast, please do, if you get a second or two, consider leaving us a little review on your podcast platform of choice. We would very much appreciate that. Likewise, you can buy us a coffee, which goes a little way to meeting some of our production costs here at the BFP as well. And if you haven't already joined our Fantasy Football League, I think there is still time for you to do that. We should be able to update you on how that's going over the next couple of weeks, because we know that a few of you have already joined that. There are a couple of other things worth mentioning just before we go as well. Our Challenger Pro League bumper season preview. We are a couple of weeks in now, but there's still plenty to be got out of that episode, which you can still listen to. That's a bit of a cracker of a special. And our recent Oostende special as well worth checking out. We had some great guests from inside the club speaking to us about the impact of the loss of Oostende and the emergence of the new club, Dijksmuid Oostende, who've actually started the season very positively, which is nice to see as well. So good luck to all of the Belgian sides in Europe over the next few days. We'll be back with you soon for another episode. Have a wonderful few days, Joris.
Yes, you too. And indeed, Oostende, Dijksmuid Oostende won 2 consecutive cup rounds after penalties, and now they already play against the Challenger Pro League side. If I'm not mistaken, one of the longer distances in Belgian football.
That's quite a day trip, that one. Yeah, we look forward to that. So until we speak to you next, which will be pretty soon actually for Matchday 6, that's it from this episode. Have a great few days, everybody, and we'll speak to you soon on another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast.